I'm sure most of you are aware that Nintendo EPD is made up of multiple different development groups, each working on different franchises. And over the years, I've noticed some interesting quirks between each of these development groups. Most of them are good, especially in the case of Nintendo EPD 8 or Tokyo, which worked on Odyssey and Bonanza, but sometimes there are consistent design issues that arise within some of these groups. None of these are particularly major issues, since a lot of these games most of these games I really enjoy, and some of these are among my favorites of all time. These are really just minor annoyances or nitpicks at the end of the day. Since many of the same people are working on these games within a group, it would make sense that their philosophies would carry over between these games, and it would include some small issues. So in this video, I wanted to discuss the weaknesses of each Nintendo development group. This will include the internal teams groups 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10. I will not include groups 1 and 2, which now merged into the co-production group, since they mainly oversee games developed outside of Nintendo. I will be including group 6 though, since they do have heavy involvement in the games that they're kind of overseeing, like Metroid Prime and WarioWare, and I think they mainly oversee the series that kind of started internally at Nintendo, or spin-offs to games that kind of started internally at Nintendo, kind of like Paper Mario, obviously spinning off from mainline Mario. So I do think it's fair to include EPD Group 6 here. And Group 7 recently merged with Group 4, so that's why I won't be discussing that group in this video. And I won't be including the external developers that are owned or partnered with Nintendo, like Monolith Soft, Intelligent Systems, Camelot, Nintendo Cube, or HAL, but I could cover them in a separate video. So the first group that I'm going to talk about is EPD Group 3, which develops the 3D Zelda games. And one problem that I have is that these games are treated way too prestigiously. The 3D Zelda games are undeniably Nintendo's largest and most impressive games made in-house, so it makes sense why they would have a lot of fanfare. But I feel like it boosts Nintendo's ego quite a bit. I think a bit too much in some circumstances, like to the point where they're just revealing 2 seconds of footage in a logo in the trailers for like any upcoming Zelda game. I'm not sure if Ocarina of Time is being developed by EPD3. I wouldn't be surprised if it is, but I feel like the way they handled that reveal, at the very least, was kind of caused by like how they were like pushing like their previous games with like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. And sometimes they go on to charge more than they should for some of these games, like the full $60 for a basic port of Skyward Sword, and their first ever $70 game with Tears of the Kingdom. And one other small issue that I have with EPD3 is the annoying menu design. And ever since Breath of the Wild, they introduced a menu design where you have to shift through items in a line. It's gotten even worse in Tears of the Kingdom, and they even brought it over to Grezzo's Echoes of Wisdom, but they did improve it there. I hope they improve it in EPD3's games, though. But yeah, I just think that's kind of a nitpick there. I know some people have other issues with modern Zelda games, like the lack of a true traditional dungeon, or like the degradable weapons, but personally, I don't have too much of an issue with those, since Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are still designed very well without those. Like, I feel like they kind of have their own thing going for it, so it really isn't something that I could necessarily blame EPD3 for. That's really just the modern direction of Zelda, so that's just kind of what I have to say about that. And then moving on to EPD4, the developers of Tomodachi Life, Rhythm Heaven, Switch Sports, Labo, Game Builder Garage, and The Playtest. Man, they develop quite a lot of games. But one nitpick that I have is that their games can have a pretty limited budget and can come across as feeling a bit cheap. I know that's like not entirely their fault, since they kind of are relegated to working on smaller projects, so naturally those smaller projects would feel a bit like cheaper, I would say. But like, I don't even mind it most of the time. It's really, I feel like the cracks really only start to show when they try to make it a bigger thing, like Switch Sports. We'll just have to see how Switch Sports Resort kind of turns out, but sometimes, like, it can feel a bit cheap. I will say, though, Tomodachi Life and Rhythm Heaven did feel pretty high quality and, like, much more in line with things developed by the other groups from Nintendo. I mean, like, I have heard a few people say that Rhythm Heaven Groove felt a bit cheap. I kinda disagree. I mean, it is supposed to be a budget title, and I feel like Rhythm Heaven has always been kind of limited in scope, since it mostly is like a 2D styled game, and so I don't really, like, fully agree in that aspect, but yeah, I can kind of understand the sentiment that EPD4's games can feel a bit cheap at times. But one other issue that I have with EPD4 is the weird the weird limitations that can be implemented sometimes. Like Sportsmates lacking customization, since, like, I feel like that's really weird in EPD4's case, since their games usually have a ton of customization. So I feel like the Sportsmates just feel really weird in that aspect. And then in Game Builder Garage, even though I love that game, there is a strict node-on limit in that game, which does make it hard to, like, make bigger projects, and you could only, like, store, like, a certain amount of games. So, I mean, like, it is cool to see, like, limitation breed creativity in Game Builder Garage. I think that has been really cool. There is a really nice dedicated community that I've been covering games from over the past 5 years with my series, but, like, I think that's really cool. But, like, if they were to make a sequel to Game Builder Garage, I do hope that they at least have, like, more space to work with. And then in Tomodachi Life, there's the 70 me limit, which can feel a bit limiting. I understand why they did that, because, like, it is a Switch 1 game, and this is, like, the first Tomodachi Life game that allows you to have, like, all of your Miis out on the island. So, I can understand that, but it is slightly disappointing. And then next, we have EPD5, the developers of Splatoon and Animal Crossing, and I've discussed this in a video before, so I won't really discuss this extensively here, but there are very limited local multiplayer options in their games. Neither Splatoon nor Animal Crossing allow for split screen, which I think is a huge missed opportunity in some cases with Splatoon Raiders, which I think would work really well for split screen. I know split screen can be hard to pull off sometimes, like especially with Splatoon Raiders where there's a lot going on screen. I could at least settle for 30 FPS split screen. I just want to see them try to do it at least, since Splatoon and split screen would be really fun. And next, we have EPD6, the group that assists with Paper Mario, WarioWare, Luigi's Mansion, and Metroid Prime. So this issue that I have may not even be an issue in the near future, since Tanabe is retiring, and that is weird restrictions or ideas pushed on existing franchises. I have discussed this extensively, so I don't even need to discuss it that much here, since Paper Mario had the character restrictions that basically kind of limited what they could get away with. Like, it seemed like for many years, prior to the Thousand Year Door remake, they weren't allowed to have original character designs that were a part of the Mario universe, or modifying existing Mario characters, or having new characters within a species like a Goomba, or a Koopa, or a Toad. But it does seem like the Thousand Year Door remake might be a turning point, and we might not see that restriction after that. I think it would be very weird if we saw that restriction now that we're getting wackier and more interesting Mario games, like Mario Wonder and Mario Kart World. It wouldn't really make sense to have these strict standards anymore in Paper Mario. And then with Metroid Prime 4 had the emphasis on the Galactic Federation characters, which kind of was revealed to be something that Tanabe wanted to push quite a lot. And this is like something that's kind of mixed. Some people don't mind it, some people kind of find it annoying. But again, since Tanabe is retiring now and Risa Tabata is mostly taking over, and she has like slightly different stances on things, like in Metroid Prime, I think she discussed one time in an interview that she like kind of respected the franchise's roots of it being like more of an isolated kind of experience. So I think we could see some changes there. So, like, the weird restrictions or ideas might not even be an issue with EPD6 in the near future. And it was really just something with Paper Mario and Metroid Prime. I really haven't noticed many issues with other franchises. Maybe a little bit in Luigi's Mansion 2, but, like, I don't know. It's like, it doesn't really seem like there's much outside of those two series. But yeah. Moving on to EPD8. The developers of 3D Mario and Donkey Kong, and this one was really hard to think of a consistent issue, because usually there are just small nitpicks between things like Odyssey and Bonanza that I could, like, think of, but, like, not really any universal issue throughout EPD8. But there is one little thing that I hope doesn't become a recurring thing, and that is in Bonanza with the FOMO elements, which I think is very weird for a single-player game, since we're seeing, like, the Mario-themed Emerald Rush events at, like, certain times, and then there's the Emerald Rush statues, and I mean, don't get me wrong, the statues are really cool. It's really cool to see Chunky Kong and Kiddy Kong, and, like, all of these characters, even the ones from Jungle Beat, like, acknowledged again. Well, though, it does make sense that Jungle Beat would be acknowledged since it was made by the same development group, but seeing, like, all of those statues is really cool. But there are only limited times where you're able to unlock these. It would be nice if there was just a big checklist, or like a separate mode in Emerald Rush, where you go to, like, unlock these statues at any time. Like, I don't know why they couldn't just do something like that, since, like, it doesn't make sense to have that. It is a single-player game, like I said. It doesn't make sense to have FOMO events. So, that is just the one issue that I have with EPD8. I really hope they don't carry this over into the next 3D Mario game. And then moving on to EPD9, the developers of Mario Kart and ARMS. Yes, I'm mentioning ARMS. And sometimes their games can lack content or features at launch. This is, like, kind of mainly referring to Mario Kart World and ARMS, since ARMS released much of its roster after launch, and then Mario Kart World was missing custom items, Bob-omb Blast, or ways to fully track your free roam progress at launch, and it's still missing 200cc, or even more, like, battle mode options. So I do think Mario Kart World was kind of limiting in that way, even though I do think it is an excellent game, despite its price and those issues. It's just, like, I do wish certain things were implemented from the start. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about EPD9. Like, their games are mostly excellent. It's just, like, sometimes there are a few things that are missing. And then finally, we have EPD10, the developers of 2D Mario and Pikmin. And their games usually lack online options. Mario Wonder doesn't have a true native online co-op. It does have an extensive online system where you can kind of connect and, like, help people online, or do, like, have, like, kind of, like, play against, like, these ghosts, like, that are kind of, like, in the background. That's really the extent of Mario Wonders online. I mean, they try to push it a lot, but it's, like, really not that interesting. But unfortunately, we don't have a traditional online co-op, like, in 3D World Switch port. Thankfully, you can use GameShare with the Switch 2 edition, but that doesn't feel like a full solution. And then in Pikmin 4, there's Dandori battles, which also lack an online option, or as well as bingo battles in Pikmin 3, which I think is a missed opportunity. It would be really nice if Pikmin had, like, an online option there. I feel like between both 2D Mario and Pikmin, it would be nice to have, like, an online, like, either co-op or versus mode. It's just kind of weird, like, especially with, like, a meetup in Bellabelle Park. It's like you to get the full experience with online multiplayer, you have to do it through GameShare, which is just kind of inconvenient, since GameShare isn't always the best option. Sometimes it can be a bit laggy, so it's just a little disappointing there. It's basically the exact opposite of EPD5's issue. It's kind of funny. It's like, it's probably because EPD5 has been so used to making, like, online experiences, while EPD10 is mostly focused on, like, mainly offline experiences. So I think that's where that kind of, like, contrast comes in. So it's pretty interesting. But yeah, those are the weaknesses that I feel each of Nintendo's development groups have. Like I said, none of them are really major issues. They're just like small things that I've kind of noticed between these development groups. But I just find it interesting discussing these development groups, since a lot of people just generalize in-house Nintendo as just being this one big blob that just pumps out games like every once in a while. Like, oh, Nintendo EPD put out Rhythm Heaven Groove, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Splatoon Raiders. Well, each of those games were developed by entirely different teams, basically like different developers, but they're all kind of like within Nintendo. So I really hope more people kind of like know that difference there and kind of acknowledge that. So yeah, but anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to check out my Discord server and Blue Sky if you want to. Stay perky!